What screams I'm way richer than I look? Unique or somewhat odd collections of things most people don't collect. I worked in a high-end whiskey store for many years, and the number of shabbily dressed men from overseas who strode in to spend $5,000, $10,000 on whiskey for their collection was staggering. They were always chatty, knowledgeable, and above all casual. One man in particular had been collecting for decades. His wife was fully supportive. She had her own collection of rare items, he implied, and he enjoyed traveling the world to pick them up as an excuse to go someplace. Conversations often went like this. Customer, I see from your website you have the rare bottling from 1967. Do you have any in stock now? Me, we do. Yes, it's downstairs. In fact, we have a few of that vintage, as well as the 1953, 1966, and 1972. Would you like to know the prices? Customer, oh, great. I think that fills a couple of gaps in my collection. And if not, the guys and my wife will enjoy cracking one open. Can you package them up for me please? Me, would you like to know how much they are? Sir. Customer, can you ship them all to my place? In fact, if you have discounts for bulk items, I'd like to know what other vintages you have, and so on. That sounds awesome. I'd love to be able to do that one day. I went to dinner with a GF and her parents. After we ate, the owner came out and asked how the meal was, and then we left without a bill ever coming to the table. On the way home I asked GF about it and she said her dad had tabs at all the restaurants he liked to eat at. As we were leaving, the valet brought the cars around and I mentioned I liked his Tahoe. I asked what year it was and he kind laughed and said whatever is the newest one. I didn't know he owned a car dealership in another city. After we ate, the owner. I work at a luxury resort. People call to book rooms with me all day and they aren't cheap. I can tell when it's obvious a young couple who had to scrape together the dough for the cheapest room. But every once in a while I'll get a call from someone who casually calls and asks to book the biggest room without asking for the price. They know exactly what they want and the price means nothing to them. 2.5k a night? No biggie. Here is my card number. When you said a young couple who had to scrape, I felt that. I had reason to frequent a small but popular marina at a certain Gulf Coast city. I encountered one old man often, enough we greeted each other with random chit-chat. Lovely gentleman. He wore a crumpled old hat, a grease-spotted t-shirt, cut-off jeans, and worn deck shoes. He always putted around the largest yacht in the marina, about 60 feet long. He would polish the chrome, wash the deck, clean the life preservers. I didn't assume he was the maintenance guy because he had such self-confidence. I never saw him actually take it out. I got up the nerve to ask security who he was. He owned most of the commercial real estate in the city. I represented a guy who was as rich, I mean as in filthy, owns buildings, plural, in Manhattan. I was in-house counsel to his company. So one day he comes to my office and tells me he needs me to go to a meeting with him cross town and about 30 blocks north. He tells me to wait, he has to get the car. So I am standing on the street, and he pulls up in the company van that his employee used for building maintenance, to carry stuff to renovate spaces for new tenants, etc. It's pretty crappy. On the way I asked him why he was driving this. All things considered, he was an older self-made guy who was pretty down to earth. Why the van? He said obviously he could drive or take a cab years before Uber, but why bother? In Manhattan most spaces in Midtown on down are parking for commercial vehicles only, and parking a car can be pricey. The van had commercial plates, so he could pretty much park in front of wherever he was going. Why waste money on a cab or parking a car? Couldn't argue with that. We parked right in front of the building. There's a prominent airline executive in Ireland who infamously bought a taxi license for his personal driver for similar reasons. They avoid any discussion of money. When paying for anything they like to do it privately, quietly, before anyone else is aware. So you end up walking in and out of places feeling like you haven't paid, almost as if money doesn't exist. They don't flaunt it. Source: I was dating a girl and didn't realize she and her whole family were rich until her dad picked us up for dinner in a brand new Mercedes, proceeded to pay for everything during our trip, and our Christmas presents were first class flights to the US from Australia for a ski holiday. That's around 10 Australian dollars 15k, 7 US dollars 11k. per person. He also financially supports his other daughter at Cornell University living in the US. I grew up poor, and still am, LOL, but I never realized how poor until I met that family. Oh god, I dated a rich girl in high school but didn't realize it until it was time to meet her dad. She had me meet them at a restaurant that there was absolutely no way I could have afforded the tip, let alone my meal. It was awkward, for me, at least, assuming I wasn't going to pay anything when the check came. The type that nonchalantly offers you a spot in their luxury box at a game or concert, or covers your course fees at a golf outing even though you barely know them. Back in high school I used to do rowing, and at the rowing club there was this guy who wasn't great at socializing, was a little awkward, but he was friendly so I didn't mind him. We often went out on the same boats and would talk to each other, as much as was possible while rowing, and at the end his dad would always pick him up afterwards wearing sweatpants, slippers and a hoodie. You might understand why. Then, I didn't believe my friend when he told me that they were one of the richest families in the world. I looked them up, and sure enough, there they were, worth an estimated $15.5 billion. Now whenever I see someone out in public looking like they are wearing what they slept in, I always assume they're mega rich and don't care about a thing anymore. Not knowing prices for common household items, foodstuffs. Either they're getting the super deluxe version and don't know the standard price, or they haven't done their own food shopping for years. Or they just don't pay attention to the price because they know they can afford it no matter what. If they are over 60 but have perfect teeth. This applies more in countries other than the US because everyone seems to have perfect teeth there. Really good teeth cost a lot of money. Controversial opinion. Teeth can be too white. It can look unnatural and off-putting to me, especially if she's playing an impoverished girl on the planet Jakku. My boss drives a $2,000 Mercedes from the 80s, usually wears jeans and crappy clothes at all times, no jewelry or watch, owns a $150k USD house. He's worth $2 billion. Yet, all his liquid income is sent directly to the mechanic for maintaining the Mercedes. Old boss to a company I worked for. He drove an old Toyota Hilux and worked in the factory of the building. I remember work breakup I spotted him put $300,000 on a roulette table, doubled it and put it in his pocket. He would always ask me impossible questions at work, and once I got it right, he bought me lunch. I mean, old Toyota's Japanese cars are cool. When people think of expensive clothing, they often think of fancy brands like Gucci, but really rich people usually consider these brands to be tacky for the most part. There are entire luxury brands of suits, dresses, clothing, watches, etc. that are used to display wealth among upper class people that would be kind of innocuous to the average person. Most anyone could recognize a Rolex, but to a person who isn't in on upper class mores, a Patek Philippe might slip under their nose. Patek Philippe sells some watches that the average person might assume are Rolex expensive, but they're actually six figures. One of my high school bros is freaking rich, while rest of us are very normal. He did nothing special, but he always wander around at near shops after school, some random branded shop that no high school boys will ever need. One time we finally asked him why he didn't went back home after school. He said he is waiting for his driver to come. Another time I met him very coincidentally at the boarding place at the airport. I was going to Vienna and he is to London. He has nothing on him, no bags or carriages, and his hair is wet. Turns out he just took a shower in the lounge. Afterward, we are still very good friends. Man, I've been in those airport lounges a few times. You really live life when you can actually go there normally, rather than through some exception. There was this one time where I had to attend a meeting with the company president. I had to wake up hella early cause the meeting was arranged early in the morning. We were all in formal attire and very serious. I expected the president to be the same, but instead, he showed up in his pajamas with his cute Pikachu mug and asked us, "Why the heck are you in suits so early in the damned morning?" It honestly made me smile and took all my nervousness away. I still work for the company and they're currently good friends. Your president has a sense of humor. Read a bunch of comments and didn't see this. Freedom over their time. Not having a steady job or having to constantly be somewhere at a specific time. I remember being in a cruise and one of the families in one of the penthouse suites didn't sleep in their suite when we were at Bora Bora overnight because they had rented an overwater bungalow. Minimum $1,000 a night. Same family got a hotel room when anchored at another atoll because they wanted to use the hotel services while spending time on the white sand beach. I have a friend from the top 1-2% in his respective country, but you'd never be able to tell. Except he'd always pay for our food when we went out with him and would sometimes be confused about the price of certain things or why we couldn't just do certain things, because they'd require big amounts of money. Another certainly wealthy foreign friend invited my entire family to stay in his family's second house. He never talks about money, but it somehow slipped that he's got a golden credit card, although I don't know the implications behind having such. Or a wealthy family I used to live with. We went to McDonald's drive-thru in our pajamas several times. Very carefree. The really exquisite credit cards are never golden. A lot of small in the know things, like a certain wristwatch that costs a fortune but for most people is indistinguishable from afar from say a €2,000 watch or a really expensive pen. There's a lot of famous really expensive looking clothes and accessories like Dolce & Gabbana or Mont Blanc. Stuff that's noticeable and recognizable. But then there's a whole bunch of way more discreet fashion and design brands that can cost a tenfold more and are at first glance indistinguishable from the normal high price range. They usually have a discreet logo or a distinct feature by which you can tell them apart. While they certainly have a good quality, lots of times, their price-performance ratio is basically non-existent. So I think they exist only for the precise purpose of saying I'm way richer than I look. Not rich, but collect fountain pens is a hobby. Very few of us choose modern Mont Blancs, as they are overpriced and have quality control issues. While my most expensive pen is a bit unusual looking, very few people would guess how much money I have wrapped up in my own case. And don't even get me started on inks. I had a very rich friend who invited me to her birthday dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. I almost didn't go because I knew I wouldn't be able to cover my share of the bill, but I saved up for it to be a good friend. I showed up and she had rented out the entire restaurant and covered the bill for the 3-course dinner with specialty cocktails for all 100 guests, several of whom she had flown in from Europe to join her. I knew she was rich, but not that rich. Wearing sunglasses on the shirt instead of on top of the head. I had a job where I came in contact with quite a few very wealthy people. They all did this. I deduced that it's because rich people have solid, heavy sunglasses. Probably expensive hair too. Having the mindset, as long as it still works, I don't need a new one. Being able to afford things that last so you don't need to buy new stuff constantly. A lot of people mentioned rich guys wearing regular or super relaxed clothing and just not giving a frick. And while I definitely think that's true, oftentimes, paired with that outfit, they wear an insanely expensive watch. It's just something most people don't notice because they don't know what these watches look like. Yes, or some other accessory, like an expensive pair of sunglasses, or their loafers are very high-end. I've had one customer who would enter in jeans and a t-shirt, maybe a baseball cap, looking totally average, but his shoes were fine Italian leather. We sold work boots, and he owned a large trucking company and had an account for his employees with us. Working not because you need the income, but because you enjoy the power of your position. My mom used to work for a guy that was a VP of an international corporation, basically handling all their finances and legal issues. He owned several malls too and invested in large amounts of property. He was in his 70s. At a Christmas party one year, somebody asked him why he hadn't retired. With a smile, he responded with, "It's not about the money." Not knowing the price of cheap food at all, such as instant ramen or cheapest crappy sandwich. My grandma's father is CEO of huge car international corporation, so when we went to store along she was so surprised, seeing the price of cheapest instant ramen, and also she said that doesn't know how they actually taste, with kind of confused innocent face, without any being cocky. I think the point where you don't know grocery prices well happens before you are rich. I make just over 100k and don't really worry about the grocery bill. Look at the watch and shoes. That's always a tell. Some rich people dress like crap, but they always get good watches. First class seats, not business. And feeling comfortable. I had once the opportunity to fly first class and it was written all over my face that I didn't belong there. I worked at a bank for several years in the early 2010. Everyone that is broke as frick would come in looking like hot crap. A lot of disheveled looking older folks were the loaded ones. My boss wears cargo shorts, a polo shirt, crappy sneakers, and a snapback hat every single day. He coordinates the hat color with the shirt. LOL, it's like a cartoon closet, and generally looks like the guy that should be mopping up the floor. He's worth 5 mil. Customers who would otherwise be yelling to speak to the owner walk past him without batting an eye. I used to work as a nanny in Dubai. My first family there really tried to show off their money. Paid lots of money for a number plate with low numbers on it for their car. IDK. It's a thing there. Always made sure that the brand names on their bags, shoes, whatever was clearly visible. Made it a huge deal that someone in the family was married to a sheikh. Had a holiday house in France that they constantly talked about. etc etc. I thought they were super rich because I hadn't ever been around anyone with that much money before. Moved on to my second family, and the difference was huge. For starters, they had recently moved to Dubai and hadn't found a house they liked yet, so they rented a freaking 3-floor flat in a super fancy hotel for 6 months before moving into their house. Like it was no big deal to live in a hotel where the fee for a night was probably more than my monthly salary. The first family had always put kids and nannies in economy class while traveling. This family had everyone flying first class or business class if seats weren't enough. When they didn't use the extended family's private jet, they tipped ridiculously well everywhere we went and generally spent huge amounts of money on all kinds of things, but never made a big deal out of it. But sometimes the mother would lock herself in her bedroom and cry while watching the news about starving kids in Yemen, or the war in Syria, but it didn't seem to ever occur to her that she could donate money to any of these causes. A weird zen you can only achieve when you have no financial pressures and you can focus on yourself and those around you. This may sound weird, but driving a Toyota Land Cruiser, on the outside, it's nothing special, and appears to just be a basic Toyota SUV, until you look at how much it costs. Base model prices are about $85k. I read somewhere that the truly wealthy people in the Hamptons can tell you who has true wealth, and who is merely rich. Truly wealthy people will buy Land Cruisers, as other wealthy people realize what it is. Rich people will buy the more traditional expensive vehicles, BMWs, Mercedes, etc. IDK. All the rich people I know drive Tesla, BMW and Porsche cars, while the one person I know who is truly wealthy drives a V12 Bentley and an Aston Martin, depending on how he's feeling that day. All of them are very kind and don't flaunt their money though, except the guy that drives the Porsches. He flaunts sometimes, LOL. When my place got wrecked by Hurricane Harvey, I mistook the owner of the hotel I wound up at with a customer. His clothes looked great, but they also looked just one step above Walmart. He would also bring dinner to the guests on Wednesday nights, which him and his staff would personally cook. He was extremely easy to talk to, even knowing that he owned the place I was staying at. Banker here. The wealthier clients are, the less they're concerned about their appearance. When you're broke you care what people think. When you're loaded you can be as eccentric as you want. Also look at assets rather than money in the bank. I see people that make millions every year with seemingly little savings because they're paying down 10+ mortgages at a time. You may see a fancy car, but I find that watches and houses are far more of an indicator. I'm a little late, but ironed or pressed everyday wear. Ever wonder why their everyday wear clothes stand out? They pay someone to hand wash, press and hang all their clothes. Source: I have worked privately for millionaires and one billionaire. My GF. She goes around with like casual clothes. I know for a fact her mom runs a company with like 9 different important patents and they have a frick load of money. Also my boss at work walks around with dirty clothes while making I believe about $100k a month. I'd be happy with $100k a year. Not trying to show your money by wearing it or constantly spending. My parents are very wealthy. My dad wears the same clothes he had in the 70s or free t-shirt he's gotten along the way. Mum gets a lot of her clothes at Costco. They only have one car and it's a 2011 Lexus because it works well and they don't see the need to buy a new one. They live in a $3 million house because it's in the safest neighborhood and has all the things they wanted for their grandkids to come be able to play. Really wealthy people just do themselves and don't care what others think. No logos. Subaru Legacy, rather than Range Rover. Beaten up watch, usually a Jaeger LeCoultre. Being called Ralph but pronouncing it Rafe. My mother, while not rich herself, grew up in a very affluent part of New York State. She said the richest people usually drove fairly mundane cars and didn't dress particularly fancy, because they knew the value of a dollar. After all, a Volvo is going to get you much more bang for your buck than a Maserati. That's how you stay rich. Honestly, dressing poorly or casually in an environment where you would expect people to be looking nice. I used to work at a decently high-end car dealership. Best sale I ever made was to a middle-aged guy in a floppy hat, unbuttoned Hawaiian shirt, board shorts and flip-flops, 75 plus miles from the beach. I was pretty new still, and greeted the guy when my co-workers all mysteriously went on smoke breaks when he sauntered onto the lot. Just a local millionaire swinging by to pick up a few cars as gifts for his graduating grandchildren. 5 cars, top trim, no haggling, full warranty, put them all on an Amex Centurion card. Back in the day, it was driving station wagons, but higher end foreign models. It was a very understated way of saying, I am successful and wealthy enough to take care of my family comfortably. I'm driving a very well-built family car. And I have enough money that I really don't care what you think. I'd see a wagon, but lo and behold, it's an AMG E63 station wagon. The poor impress with what they wear, the middle class impress with what they drive, the upper middle class impress with where they live, the wealthy impress with what they do. From my ex, when he was schmoozing at a charity gala he got invited to as part of a college club thing he was in. Whenever you ask them what they do for work they shrug it off and say something like, I have volunteered for X charity in the past. It's standard conversation when you're breaking the ice. Oh, what do you do, etc. But he said he stopped asking because no one had jobs, or wanted to disclose what they were. A very sharp haircut with a professional blowout every few days. You can dress down all you want, but expensive hair is always noticeable. Have you seen Mark Zuckerberg? I work in management consulting and though we all get paid well and can afford nice things, more or less you're expected to dress for your day. That is to say, wear your nice stuff to your meeting with the big corporations where people will appreciate it, but if your client is a manufacturing facility in a business park, maybe don't wear your best suit, tie, and a Rolex. Essentially the rule is to dress to the same standard as the best dressed person there. Business is all about building relationships with people and if you choose to be unaware of your audience and come in dressed to the nines every time, they're all going to think you have your head up your butt and trust you less. People want someone they can relate to. Wealth understands that it's these sorts of connections that matter way more in the long run than the personal desire to flex on everyone. Someone who has normal, everyday middle-class type belongings that takes immaculate care of the item shows wealth in my experience. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.